Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Carriers Can Bill 10 Times Faster, presented to you by Microdia. If you're not familiar with Microdia, Microdia is a software company specifically focused in the field of transportation and logistics, not anything else. We've been around for over 20 plus years, and we've helped approximately 450 transportation and logistics businesses to streamline processes and see huge returns from automation. My name is Eric Takuto. I'm a digital marketing specialist here at Microdia. My job is mainly focused on spreading the word about the values of Standardization, automation, and the returns from that. I'm joined here to my left.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I'm Brock Buckley. I'm an account executive here at Microdia. I work with trucking and logistics companies, and we help examine their back office billing processes and try and streamline and find efficiencies for them.
Thank you, Brock, and thanks for joining me today on today's webinar.
Happy to be here.
I'm excited to get started. Moving on, let's cover our agenda for today. So in today's webinar, we're going to be discussing four main topics. First and foremost, we will be covering how carriers are billing 10 times faster than they used to, and this includes a few key points. We'll look at the slow manual process that many transportation and logistics companies still implement to this day, versus the automated, faster process that many Standardized customers and other customers of other technologies do implement today. Secondly, we'll look at the four pillars of an efficient billing process. So what that is are the four characteristics of what compromise or make up a efficient and speedy billing process. Thirdly, we'll look at the specific technologies used to implement these types of concepts and ideas. And lastly, we'll talk about two real-world companies who have implemented these technologies and these ideas into practice and actually seen real returns from these concepts and from these ideas. So let's get started.
Great, thanks, Eric. So what I want to do is just walk you through what we've seen as an old, slow manual process. Now, this isn't to say that this is every way that logistic or trucking companies work their back office, but it's kind of what we found is a reoccurring trend in a lot of the customers that we've been able to help. So if we look at the first step in a scenario, the driver's completed a load and he's got his sign. He or her has got their signed POD. So they're going to return that back to the terminal or head office. That can take anywhere up to 1 to 3 business days. Right. The signed POD is going to sit in an in tray at the head terminal or office, and they're going to have someone validating those documents and catching up to all the different paperwork that's coming into the office. That can take up to a day for them to get to the specific signed POD. So once the indexer grabs the pile of trip documents and begins to index, that's taken another day. So now we're reaching our accounting department, and it's been 5 days since the delivery has been completed. The biller then finds the specific indexed proof of delivery in reference, potentially the following Monday, and begins to create an invoice. So as they're doing that, that can take up to potentially 3 days. So we've all run into situations where you're dealing with a lot of paperwork and potentially something can go missing. So in some scenarios, like sometimes a biller can't find all the supporting trip documents needed to invoice, and then there's going to be a lot of tracking down through departments, whether they're reaching out to the specific driver, whether they're reaching out to the client, or whether they're reaching out to other departments within their organization. So that kind of back and forth and touch points can take up to an additional day. The biller then finishes the invoices and places it on a pile to be kicked out at the end of the week. And then we're looking at another day, another 2 days to the biller mailing out all those complete invoices. So we've gone through this manual process, and if we're kind of doing a tally on the days in which it's taken since the delivery has been completed, right, we're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15 business days.
So that could even be 2 to 3 business weeks.
Absolutely.
And there's 7 steps here, and it seems like, there's also a variety of things that could go wrong even within these steps, making that even longer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can talk about some of the specific points about this older, slow manual process. I want to identify a couple things. First and foremost, it's paper dependent. When you're dealing with paper, you're going to have a lot of associated manual work going through sorting those documents, and we're looking at those specific steps and seeing those 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, they add up. So there's a lot of unnecessary time in every step of the way. The point that we want to reiterate and hammer home is that your driver has completed his or her trip, and it's been up to 2 weeks, maybe even more, and the customer still hasn't been billed.
Right, right. So, I mean, I imagine that there are a lot of established transportation logistics companies using this process, and they're very successful, and they might not see a reason to switch. But if you've watched any late night infomercial, you might have heard the phrase,
"There's got to be a better way."
There's got to be a better way.
There's got to be a better way. You're absolutely right. And I mean, what we want to hammer home is that we're not saying that the processes that you have in place aren't working. We're just trying to find ways to streamline things and make things more automated to speed up that process. So if we're looking at the new fast automated process in which Standardization offers, we're going to go through that scenario again. So using Standardization, the driver's going to finish the load like he did before. He receives the signed POD. They scan it and they automatically send it back to the head office. So they're doing that via a couple different ways of capture methods, but the main point is it's instantaneously, upon completion of delivery, getting back to your head office. Moments later, someone on your accounting or billing team is going to get a notification to say, hey, there's a signed POD and we want to start to create the invoice. By that, the biller can generate an electronic invoice, attach all the associated documentation that's needed to complete the order, and marks it as a complete invoice. Our system then automatically emails out the invoice to the required customer.
That's great. So obviously, you have here 9 minutes. That's significantly faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about the whole point of this webinar presentation is to talk about speeding up your billing by up to 10 times. If we're looking at the older past, you're looking at 10 to 15 days. We've cut that down to 10 minutes, pretty much.
Right. So outside of speed, what else should we take away from this fast automated process that you've outlined here?
Well, we're looking at some of the older points that we saw in the manual slow process, and we're kind of taking pretty much the opposite of every point that we saw in the manual process. First and foremost, it's paperless. There's not as much time between correspondence within departments within your organization. We've automated that process so that what your folks in your billing and your indexers are only going to be dealing with exceptions to those specific invoicing practices. You're going to be getting the most out of your human capital, and it's shaving time off every other way, and it's going to take minutes instead of days. And at the end of the day, we want to allow our customers and our partners to bill customers the same day that they're completing the delivery.
That's a great point you made there. So let the humans deal with the exceptions,
yeah,
and let the computer or the robot or Synergize deal with the brunt of the work.
Absolutely. Get the best out of your human capital.
Great. So next point on our agenda is the 4 pillars of a fast billing process, and we'll quickly go through that. So being paperless, being automated, having standardization or being standardized in your practices and processes, and being streamlined. So Brock, why don't you take us through the first pillar, which is paperless?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen with a bunch of our customers, one of the main problems is that just you got a ton of backloaded documents, right? And with just having piles and piles of paper, you lead to things of inefficiency when you have an indexer or someone validating those documents going through all of them. It's an inefficient practice. If we could get something to automate and to do that for you, you could have that individual who is responsible for that doing other things for your organization. There's always human error. It's a very manual task, and then there's a bunch of unnecessary costs that go into it if you have a staff of maybe more than 3 or 4 indexers or validators within your organization going through that paperwork every day. The main point that we're kind of seeing with paper is that if it can be avoided, it should be, and from an industry standpoint, we're seeing that it could potentially be eliminated at some point.
Right, so those are all great points. So let's move on to the next pillar.
Yes, we want to talk about automation, right? The things that we want to talk about in terms of benefits of automation is we're really saving time. I mean, we really want to hammer that point home. We saw the difference between the manual and the automated practice. You're saving tons of time. Throughout that, there's going to be a whole lot less errors because the processes are going to be streamlined and automated, and it's just more efficient for your organization's billing practices. As we alluded to earlier, not every part of this process is going to be automated. It's not like you're going to scan your signed POD and the invoice is going to magically pop up.
Right.
There are going to be scenarios in which your indexers or your billing staff is going to have to do some back and forth, but those instances are going to be the only times that they're going to have to deal with it. So they're dealing with the exceptions, so there's not going to be surprises.
That's a great takeaway. So they're dealing with the exceptions rather than the rule or a majority of the process.
Absolutely.
All right. So here's another one, the buzzword standardization that we hear a lot. Tell us why standardization is important.
So again, we're seeing a lot of reoccurring themes in these 4 pillars. Hitting the point home again, fewer errors. With standardization, you're going to get better optics and visibility on your back-end billing process. And with that, like anything, with better visibility, you're going to get an idea of where you can make improvements over time. So by having that better optics, you're going to have a greater idea of, okay, where are the gaps and how can we change it? Additionally, the benefit of Synergize is as your organization grows, we want to grow with you. We're a completely scalable solution, so it's not like you're going to set something up with us initially and then have to go to something different as your organization grows. It's an organic solution, and we want to grow with you folks. Moving on to the last point with being streamlined is kind of tying on to the automation standpoint. With that visibility, if there is a gap within your process, you're going to be able to have the optics to identify those bottlenecks. And by identifying those bottlenecks, those touch points that you've seen in the manual process are going to be reduced. They're not going to be having to chase people within your department down for specific answers because a lot of it is going to be automated in that sense. Moving on the stance of automation, you're going to be able to expand it. The more you use it, the more efficiencies you're going to be able to find,
right.
The more bottlenecks you're going to be able to reduce. And the automated process is far easier to control than a manual process because you can make changes as you see fit.
That's great, and those are all great points. Obviously, a few of those points reiterated a few times, which is reducing errors,
right? Saving time,
letting, I guess, the automation do a brunt of the work. You've probably heard of the Pair 2 principle, 80-20. Let the machine do 80% of the work, and that 20%, let the humans in charge make the calls.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. I think the main point that we want to hammer home is that you're going to be able to increase your billing, your billing cycle. Decrease the billing cycle. Increase additional revenue to your organization, and you're not going to have to add additional headcount in doing that.
Right. That's the scalability that you talked about.
Absolutely.
Great points. Okay, so let's move on. So, we've talked about a few different high-level concepts. Sometimes you hear all these words, it can become a little bit overwhelming, but without getting too far into the weeds, why don't you tell us about the specific tools that you might use in order to execute some of these strategies and concepts and ideas so that you can conceivably build 10 times faster?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So far in this webinar, we've talked about the what and why to go towards automation from a manual process. We want to examine right now the how. In its base, Synergize is a document management software. So we want to be able to digitize and automate the flow of your documents within your organization. Every organization has different ways in which they're doing things, and that's where the automation engine comes into play. It's a completely configurable tool that's going to be able to map up your billing and your invoice process as granular to customer-specific needs, to how those documents are going to flow throughout your organization. We spoke earlier about some of the efficiencies of getting documents into your organization as fast as possible upon the completion of delivery.
Right.
This is where the mobile capture application comes into play. Almost everyone today has a smartphone, and we have an offering that helps customers get their critical business documents such as PODs, BOLs, carrier invoices ingested into Standardize and back into your TMS upon completion of delivery. One of our indexing tools that we have is a inbox monitoring tool, in which that's going to help you, once it's digitized and ingested, the inbox monitoring tool is going to help index and route where the documents go throughout your organization. And as we said earlier, the automatic notifications and collections is a tool that's going to alert your folks in the back office upon when PODs are specifically arriving in, if there's an issue that needs to be dealt with that doesn't adhere to the automated process, or when a collection is confirmed in.
Great, thanks for covering that. I mean, it's great to get a bit of an idea about these tools and what they do and how they help us achieve those concepts or those goals that we talked about earlier. So we've covered quite a bit of things here, but ultimately, myself, and I'm sure you're similar, you hear these pitches, you hear these ideas, these concepts, you're not really sure if you buy it or not. But ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. So why don't we talk about two real-world examples of transportation and logistics businesses that have implemented Standardize and various pieces and modules of Standardize and seen actual results. So why don't you start with Royal Trucking?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric. So one of our customers, Royal Trucking, it's a universal problem that we see. I mean, Royal Trucking, they're doing a fantastic job in terms of growing their business, but with the growing business comes associated documentation and a lot of paperwork. And their indexers and their billers and their accounting department, I mean, they're dealing with a lot of backlog documentation. And simply, they just can't keep up with the demand. And as a result, their time to bill had grown to over 10 days. They had an unbilled revenue of approximately $600,000. I mean, part of this is due to, you know what, it was an older standalone system, and you know what, it might have worked for their organization when the workload wasn't where it was at today, but as they've grown, I mean, they just can't keep up with it. What Standardize was able to do with our solutions architecture team and our account executives, we get a really good idea of kind of how things work without your organization, what your current process is, and we try and find ways of how our software is going to automate those steps for you that are kind of holding some of the bottlenecks, some of the backlogs. So what we did was we said, you know what, paperwork's a huge issue with you folks. You know what, let's try and eliminate that as much as we can, and some of these manual processes that you're dealing with today, let's try and automate them. So we put in a paperless and automated solution. A great thing about Standardize is that it's very integrated to two main pieces of software that we're seeing logistics and trucking companies dealing with, and that's their TMS and then that's their accounting software. So in almost every scenario, we are able to integrate with any TMS and any accounting software, and that's exactly what we did with Royal Trucking. So through understanding their process, through automating some of the steps that we could, we were able to cut their time to bill to less than a day from the 10 days that I referenced earlier. Right. And their unbilled revenue went from, I believe it was $600,000 all the way down to $35K. So, I mean, that's drastic.
So that's a really good example, and it's actually pretty interesting. So obviously, Royal Trucking was doing something right. You know, their business is growing.
Business is great. It's like everything that they're doing right. It's just we're trying to maintain that great stuff that they're doing and try and help them out in taking up some of the backlog that they have at their office.
So they had a great problem, obviously. They were growing rapidly, they're scaling up, but I almost kind of wonder, where would they be today if they didn't have something like Standardize in place and these processes in place with automation and paperlessness?
The time to bill could have exceeded to more than 10 days, and I mean, I don't want to think it, but I mean, that unbilled revenue could have continued to climb as well.
Right. So it seems like this solution really gave them a way to get past that ceiling, right?
Absolutely.
Great. So they're not the only example I know that we have to share today. The next example we have is Sunset Logistics. So tell us a bit about Sunset Logistics and what they were able to do with Standardize.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. And I mean, Standardize is over, I think Eric mentioned, we partner with over 400 transportation and logistics companies across North America. Similar to the same problem that Royal Trucking had, it's dealing with processing paperwork. So in Sunset Logistics standpoint, they had approximately 1,400 loads a day, and getting those documents into their terminal or their head office was a problem as well. The drivers were taking too long to get stuff back, and getting that complete and accurate paperwork was just taking far too long to keep up with the demand. So, as we did with Royal Trucking, our solution architects and our account executives worked with Sunset Logistics, and we said, you know what, let's try and adopt a mobile capture application to assist you in capturing and sending those trip documents quicker back to your head office. With our automated indexing tool, an example of inbox monitoring, we were able to assist in the validation of their proof of deliveries, and we were able to integrate into their TMS, which was TMW. So the great things that we were able to do with Sunset Logistics, their time to bill was reduced by 15 times, and from a workload standpoint, 50% of their staff who were dealing with these billings and dealing with these documentations were no longer required in that, so they were able to be redeployed to do other tasks within the organization, hammering home that point of getting the most out of your human capital within your organization.
Great. So, I confess I knew about this example of Sunset Logistics beforehand. I knew a little bit about it. The most interesting parts to me were, first and foremost, Standardization, integrating with that mobile capture application that they were using, being able to integrate with their existing TMS, and using inbox monitoring to do that. So it seemed like it was able to bridge a lot of gaps there and bring all their various softwares kind of together as opposed to being standalone pieces.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. Synergize as a software is extremely configurable and versatile. And the main points that we work on as account executives is we really want to get a strong understanding of what your process is today and how we can find some efficiencies within it.
Yeah, and also found it's pretty interesting that they were able to redeploy that billing and indexing staff to other tasks. I'm sure whether it's allowing them to explore other jobs or other business units in transportation, or maybe they're on the phone with customers more often, whatever the case might be. So I'm sure those people are happy too.
Yeah, every business has different needs and different gaps, and by allowing automation into your process, you have the opportunity to redeploy staff to different tasks.
Okay, great. So in conclusion, when you cut your time to bill by 10 times, you're obviously improving organizational efficiency. You're saving time and money, so you're obviously seeing a return on your investment.
Absolutely.
Reducing errors, improving customer service overall, and increasing your cash flow. So tightening that unbilled revenue, getting it in your pocket, and obviously seeing tremendous growth and returns for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. And for the participants on this webinar, I'd be really curious to hear kind of what those kind of efficiencies in your billing cycle would mean to your company. Would love to hear more. The great thing about the AEs at Synergize and really all the staff is we're extremely curious, and we always want to find different ways that we can find efficiencies for you folks.
So the question that we posed to all the participants is, what would billing 10 times faster mean for your business? And of course, if you have the answer to that question or questions about the question, you can contact either myself or Brock at the email addresses provided in front of you. I guess that's all for today. Obviously, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for joining us in today's webinar on how carriers can bill 10 times faster. If you do, again, have any other questions, maybe some of the questions from the previous period hit some lights for you, or brought up some other ideas that you want to banter about, Brock or myself are both available, of course, at your leisure. You can contact us at the emails provided in front of you. And of course, want to once again thank everyone for taking the time out of their schedules to join us for How Carriers Can Bill 10 Times Faster, presented to you by Mike Radia, and of course talking about our wonderful product, Synergize. So thanks again, and I'll be wrapping this up. Have a very nice day, and we hope to hear from you soon.